Hi, today I want to talk about innovation and specifically technology. So, this is meant for you if you're implementing innovation of any sort and you're going to be using technology to support that innovation. First of all, innovation and technology, they're sort of construed to be the same thing in the minds of many. It seems to be that way when you look at the discourse on innovation. And yet, it's sort of a misconception, right? Because you can implement innovation in so many different ways. However, my point is to address technology today. So when I say technology, of course, I'm referring to IT, and this could be enterprise software, enterprise resource planning, enterprise risk management, governance software. Could be Internet of Things or industrial Internet of Things, where you establish connection between elements of a business by using sensors and collecting the data. Could be some sort of digital business transformation. People are saying, how are we going to digitize the business? Or RPA, robotic process automation, where you've got a network of software apps, bots to capture data and intercommunicate. So the question then is, all right, well, how are these various technologies faring? How are things going in these, latest applications? And the answer is they're not faring very well. So judging from a lot of the articles online, here's an example. RPA implementations fail more often than not. Another one, half of ERP projects fail because of the implementation process. So I'm quoting headlines from CIO Magazine, ABAS, ABAS, ERP, and so on. And what are some of the reasons that they're talking about? Well, there's poor change management. There's excessive focus on fast implementation. Employee needs are neglected in the implementation. Processes and workflows are disrupted, so people can't get their normal work done while the new thing is being implemented. There's lack of enterprise architecture. So it seems that even the IT experts who are supposed to be coordinating the various standards, interoperability of systems, and so on, they're not looking after it very closely because there's failure on that front. Lack of governance, that is, the roles and responsibilities are not being very well defined. Poorly defined project goals, lack of sufficient commitment from the higher ups, from senior executive. So this is all fairly shocking to me because I've seen all of this happen in various contexts, various administrative contexts, both in private sector and public sector over the past several years in my career. And it seems that management is just not learning the lessons. So let me suggest to you a framework for IT implementation that comes from one of my favorite texts. I'm quoting from Up and Running, Integrating Information Technology and the Organization by Richard E. Walton. So on page 3, he's got a diagram where it sets out sort of a framework with phase 1 being, quote, generating the context for IT, that is by aligning business, organization, and IT strategies. Phase 2, design the IT system by involving users in the process. Phase 3, putting the IT system into practice by managing the rate of change and the development of skills. So that is an excellent framework for IT implementations of any description. And you know when that was published? You'll be shocked. It was published in 1989. All right, so let's discuss in a little more detail the 3 phases of an IT project, according to this author. This will be my commentary on his major framework. So the first phase, generating the context for IT. What this means is you have to do some planning. You've got to understand what the history of the company or the organization is, what the environmental scan looks like. In other words, what are the latest developments in this industry or in this practice? What are the other jurisdictions doing? What is the competition doing? What are the emerging issues, the emerging risks, and so forth? And that whole research effort will inform your plans. Now, as Eisenhower once said famously, all plans are useless, but planning is essential. So you've got to have a starting point to plan and understand exactly what the goals are of the organization. And only in that way can you really properly assess and implement the IT. Now, I think the modern community for IT has really lost its taste for planning because Agile, for example, which is a software development method, is supposed to be, the keyword for organizational operations. Business agility, it's so important. Lean startup is again a software development method, but it's intended to inform the planning and operation of organizations. And yet, this is a misconception. I can tell you, if you want to be agile and respond properly to the environment and to be able to take in, let's say, custom orders and process them efficiently and not lose the integrity of your normal workflow, then you have to plan. You have to sort this out with a deliberate plan beforehand. And only then can you be agile. So the agile organization cannot simply react impulsively to every signal in the environment. There's a planned system that's needed. So let me expound on this just a bit further. I did mention lean startup, agile, and these other buzzwords. They sort of correlate very well with the spirit of our time, which is that attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. People want things faster and faster. Time for reflection and development are just not a priority, but the result is eventual failure of your complex system. And this was also emphasized by organizational writer Mintzberg, who said, well, strategic planning is dead, it's too academic, things change too fast. But this is all just a misconception, and it's answered perfectly by the quote from Eisenhower that I said earlier, that is, all plans are useless, but planning itself is essential. I believe that. Planning is essential. Why is that? Because you need to establish a starting point. So, of course, you can't predict the future, and that's the excuse that's always given to rationalize the approach of just being really agile and doing really fast development cycles and just getting it out there. And these methods may be fine and applicable to certain situations in software development, especially when you're addressing a vast market and you need to interact with that market through online techniques and so on. I don't dispute that. But when it's adopted as a general business practice and when it's put into situations where you need to pay close attention to what the client needs are, and you already have a closely established relationship with that clientele, then it could be exactly the wrong thing to do. So you can't predict the future, but when you start planning, what you do is you set out all of the various elements that you need to take account of. That's one of the main benefits of planning. And we can see the effects. If you don't do that, then all of a sudden you've missed very elementary things, rookie mistakes, where you should be coordinating, let's say, the file formats or the compatibility or interoperability of systems when you're doing robotic process automation implementation. And yet we can see from the articles that people aren't doing even that elementary level of planning. The other thing is, to plan something is to set yourself psychologically in a direction where you start to create the future. You start to intend your own activity. You start to intend where things will go, and that has an effect on reality. It starts to steer things in the right direction. So I would say that people who have a clear intent, and that intent is really well informed by the environmental scan, by their knowledge of the business, the knowledge of the corporate values and its goals, its strategic direction, and all of the various elements of the problem. When all of that is gathered into your thought, then you're going to have much more success in the actual implementation of the project. You'll have better success in the selection, configuration, customization of the software. All right, so let's do a summary of what I discussed today. We were talking about innovation and technology and how innovation and technology are often construed to be the same thing. Also, that technology itself is not being very well implemented these days. From the latest reports, it seems that people are not learning the lessons of successful implementation, which were already established as far back as 1989. And I discussed in some detail phase 1 of a good framework for IT implementation, which has to do with proper planning. So in my next talk, I'll talk about the further phases in more detail, phase 2 and phase 3. And in the meantime, if you'd like to check some free resources that I've got, free 5-part online series on innovation, please check my website, ertechnical.com. Thanks for listening.